Last time, with development well into production of Final Fantasy VIII, the team had started to build and evolve the combat and presentation the series was known for in new and never before seen ways, through the testing of enemies, level scaling, and a whole junction system, while also developing a new side game called Triple Triad to cash in on the card game fad of the late 90s. But despite hype and praise from the game's reveal and demo, trouble struck the entire Laguna half of the game having to be cut, leading to many locations to go with it. And so now, the team scrambles to consolidate the story around Squall and make a very memorable and worthy entry in the series, to further focus on developing the story about love, beginning a grand search for the perfect vocalist to make the game's iconic theme, and a massive shakeup in localization. Today on this final part, we shall explore the history and beta unused content of Final Fantasy VIII. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button too, to further support us to keep creating new videos. With Laguna as a protagonist now written out, the game was now entirely going to be focused on Squall and his gang henceforth, developing a game that would show the growth of this loner student into believing camaraderie, friendship, and even love. And this was now even more in focus as the central theme of the game, a story about love, something that writer Nojima had initially braced himself for, expecting the worst. This didn't help that it was being made with an all-male writing team too, who Nojima, who at the time was 35, was even questioning what even is love. And so they purposely crafted the story, whereby Squall would open up bit by bit to Renoa instead of just instantly being into her, even making an element where you will see and experience the love story more if you make the right choices, such as this one mission where you are to split up the team for a while and send half of them on a mission to Missile Base, which could include Renoa. If that is done, the Squall side of the story is made a lot duller, as Renoa isn't there to wake him up, tour the location with him, and even cuts an entire FMV cutscene that would play there otherwise. In fact, the story of love was such a major focus that composer Nobuo Uematsu wrote a song that will be presented as not just the main theme of the game, but as well as the theme to Squall and Renoa's romance. A song by the name of Eyes on Me. This was going to be a vocal track, a first for the series, and therefore a search for the perfect vocalist was needed. And so the staff spent time listening to countless different CDs to see who they could approach. Nojima himself was a big fan of Chinese singer Fei Wong and decided to toss his hat in the mix by distributing CDs of Fei Wong to the staff discreetly. Uematsu, who had no idea who she was prior, absolutely fell in love with her voice and felt it would be perfect for the mood of the song. It also helped that Wong being Chinese fit the international image of the series. This was a surprise to Nojima, as she wasn't big in Japan and thought the staff would just get a bigger name, like Mariah Carey instead. And so quickly, Fei Wong was contacted, and she accepted. Being that Wong was in Hong Kong, she had a rather stacked schedule and couldn't travel to Japan, so instead, Uematsu sent her the medley and let her record on her own. Uematsu, upon hearing the results, described it as truly heavenly. The song, while it had many arrangements being made to play during various points between Squall and Renoa, was going to have this version played during the section where the pair are alone in space, within the Ragnarok. Event planner Hiroki Chiba was designing this very scene. He adjusted the scene to be in sync with the song, going frame by frame just to get it perfect. In fact, the importance of the song was even going to be incorporated into the story, whereby Laguna's old love interest, Julia, wrote the song about Laguna, her feelings to him, and never being able to see him again after he was called away on a mission. And the music of Final Fantasy VIII didn't stop there, as composer Uematsu had a whole slew of new compositions in the works, continuing his renowned tracks in the series, with emphasis this time on evoking emotion through music. Aside from Eyes on Me, there was one more vocal track, but this one being a Latin track, much akin to his work on One Winged Angel in Final Fantasy VII. This song being called Liberi Fatali, a song to be played during the game's opening cutscene of Squall and Cypher during morning practice. This was on the level of Eyes on Me in its emphasis and importance, with how it not only would open up the game with a bang, but being a lengthy FMV opening that took in that storyboard that Tetsuya Nomura had drawn up previously, which Nojima had written as a means to give an excuse for Squall to get a scar that Nomura had given Squall on a whim when drawing him. It was all coming together, and so Squaresoft's subsidiary, Visual Works, was hot on making this, and the large assortment of FMV cutscenes for this game, with a team of 35 people, and making more of these scenes than ever before, at roughly 20 minutes more than Final Fantasy VII's. Unlike the game's in-game animation, motion capture was being used for even more realistic movements, capturing everything from Squall and Renoa's ballroom dance to Zell simply doing backflips. And the FMVs were overall being finalized and cleaned up after all the work done here. The shot of Renoa within the FMV cutscene of the demo, now replaced with Selfie. Squall had a Seed uniform on, and the unnamed soldier, now replaced with Quistis, let alone just overall improving all aspects of the quality. Thus, through many variations, they had at least 700 cuts of FMVs made for the 75 FMVs that were going to play in game. Taking about a whole year to manage this feat, it all came together. And that really is the key word to all this. It was all coming together. The game was being constantly tested and debugged via a debug room that could let the team access any part of the game and create any combination of characters, possible to even have Squall, Cypher, and Idea on the same team for testing purposes. And with that, various other parts of the game were being changed and finalized. For instance, the scan menu would let you rotate and move anyone scanned, including the party members, which at the last minute got a restriction, preventing one from turning the female characters upside down to view them at certain angles. As well, decisions were being made on keeping or cutting certain elements, such as the alien Poo-Poo and its side quests, which Tetsuya Nomura fought to keep in the game. And with these, the story was finalized and set in stone, music recorded, FMVs developed. This to the point where for the Japanese commercials, it was edited mainly using the impressive new FMV cutscenes of the game to the game's iconic theme, Liberi Fatali and Eyes on Me, to drive hype home. So much so that pre-orders hit a massive sum of 2 million in Japan alone. And for one last time, series artist Yoshiaki Amano was called to do one final art piece for the game. So far, his role was to draw concept art instead of being the key character artist, and had just drawn his own renditions of the cast and scenes up to this point. Now, however, he was to adapt Tetsuya Nomura's designs of Squall and Renoa in order to make the logo for the game about love. And so, through several concept pieces drawn, a Squall embracing Renoa was made as the game's centerpiece ready for launch. And so, on February 11, 1999, the game was released in Japan. On top of Famitsu magazine giving it a very high 37 out of 40 score, it quickly became a hit, selling 2.21 million copies in just a single day, clearly carrying on the torch that its predecessor had laid out and delivering a massively anticipated entry. But the game was still about half a year away from its Western release, its true test. While Final Fantasy VII was a game that had broke the trend of JRPGs doing terribly in the West, could Final Fantasy VIII continue that as well? And so came time to localize Final Fantasy VIII. Unlike before, where Sony assisted Squaresoft in the localization of the game, Squaresoft was taking it on themselves. In fact, the whole process of localization had seen a massive shakeup at the company to have more contact between the Japanese and Western teams in Costa Mesa, California, create a more faithful script. The biggest hurdle with Final Fantasy VII was its poor localized script that was chock full of grammatical errors, random cursing, and many pieces of dialogue just being lost in translation. The idea was to avoid that this time. This was being led by a relatively new industry localizer by the name of Alexander O. Smith, who would later on become a rather prominent name within the world of gaming localization, together with 4 translators and 2 editors, which latter was a step up from Final Fantasy VII that had no editors whatsoever. By having time to work with the team in Japan, the Western team as such was able to research and understand the world of Final Fantasy VIII, leading to them using proper terminology that Japan had been using, such as the spells Fyra or Blazzaga, as opposed to what 7 used, which was Fire 2 and Ice 3. But even though the script was being written out faithfully this time, they still faced a hurdle of getting access to the game's text files themselves. The dev team weren't used to the idea of this being needed, since this tandem localization was somewhat new to them. As a result, the localization team resorted to drastic actions and used a PlayStation Game Shark in order to access the text files from the Japanese game itself and begin localization. But while the game was being localized, one feature was not going to come to the West. This was called Chocobo World. It was a feature to be used with the Japan-exclusive PocketStation, where one could use that with Final Fantasy VIII and raise a Chocobo within it, which can get a number of items that could be used within the main game. In addition, a few aspects were being censored for the Western release, this mainly being as a result of more bloodier or gorier aspects. One being the boss Garo Garo had its red guts spilling out of it, but was censored more to a blue. Meanwhile, in Ultimecia's castle armory, there was red blood on the wall, with a sword sticking out. This was changed to green ooze. A stranger choice really, as blood wasn't something too strange in the series, as Final Fantasy VII had it with the trail of blood in Shinra Tower, and even this very game was keeping Squall's face getting sliced and blood spilling out of it in its very intro. Simultaneously, the European localization was going on too, but that as a result did receive a bit of exclusive censorship too. The first being Selphie's weapons, the nunchakus. At the time in the UK, nunchakus were being used as a weapon to assault people, and so any references to the word nunchaku were changed to the shinobu, which means master priest. Another change would affect the character Caraway. As European sensitivities were against showing any imagery of Nazi Germany, the red armband on him could make some allusions to the Nazi uniform. As a result, that was changed to blue. This one, however, did make it into the North American version too. On the flip side, the European version was getting a limited edition box set, the only region in the world to get this, coming with a t-shirt, a memory card, character labels for said memory card, and even a poster featuring Squall with his gunblade on one side and Cypher on the other. And so after a half a year, Final Fantasy VIII released in North America on September 9, 1999, and in Europe on October 27, 1999. Quickly, the game became the top seller in the US, whereby it would hold the spot for over 3 weeks at selling over 1 million units, becoming the fastest selling Final Fantasy game to date. This was followed by strong reviews from many acclaimed publications, the storyline of the game being the point of praise, which would be heard loudly from ones such as Edge Magazine. In fact, Edge Magazine felt it was a far more accomplished game compared to Final Fantasy VII. Electronic Gaming Monthly, feeling the characters and story are so deep that you are forgetting that you are playing a video game. Another major point of praise being its visuals, with Spin magazine specifically pointing to its FMV cutscenes, from the ballroom dance scene to the various poses and explosions. But when it came to the gameplay, where it would receive its main bits of criticism, mainly being aimed at the new junction system. As the junction system required one to constantly draw magic from enemies in order to strengthen your characters, it was a tedious task for most, such as Game Revolution, who found it absolutely boring. Despite that though, some such as IGN agreed it may be rather complicated, but the customization and strategies one could make out of it would be what RPG fanatics love to obsess over. Though at the same time, IGN despised the Guardian Forces themselves. While they were cinematic as hyped to be, they were long and tedious, especially with how much one may use them throughout the game. Nevertheless, the overall consensus was that it was another hit Final Fantasy game from Squaresoft, and a must-play in the series. Final Fantasy VIII was indeed a major hit, and an important one in that it established that Final Fantasy VII wasn't just a one-shot success in the series, but rather this was now a series that had a grand dedicated audience, going on to eventually sell 8.6 million copies on the PlayStation, and with the success of that game came a greatest hits release on August 20th. The game would even see a port to PC, as did Final Fantasy VII, handled once more by Eidos, featuring several enhancements such as smoother graphics, rearranged music to a degree, and even enabling one to play Chocobo World, which Westerners couldn't due to a lack of the PocketStation. In fact, the game was so memorable that for displaying the power of the PlayStation 2, Squaresoft made a tech demo conducting the iconic ballroom dance scene between Squall and Renoa in real time that closely matched the quality of the models and background of the original ballroom dance FMV. And as time moved forward, the game would see ports to future PlayStation hardware, including a remaster of the game where it would remake the models with a high poly count, while giving several quality of life changes, including a nifty triple speed that allows one to breeze through drawing all the magic they wish for, titled appropriately as Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, in which case it was not just coming to the PlayStation, but everything. Much as Final Fantasy VII came for the first time to Nintendo through the Switch, so did Final Fantasy VIII, and even physically packed together in one nice bundle. But while the development of Final Fantasy VIII was sporadic but yet successful, during that time over in Squaresoft's Hawaiian division, plans were in the works for the 9th entry, that instead of continuing the steampunk modern world set up by Final Fantasy VI and VII, this would go back to the roots of the series as the great swan song of the PlayStation, and the last Final Fantasy game that series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi would be involved with. And thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button for more Final Fantasy and other games gaming history and cut content soon. Hit the like button and comment below on if you enjoyed or disliked Final Fantasy VIII. So everyone, thank you for watching.